Okay, guys, Panzer J back here in Operation No Time to Die, and we've come to the end of the game. If you watched Madman Dan's US KMT turn, you know that he rolled a 3 on the variable die roll ending, and 1 through 3 is what we needed for the game to end. So the game will end here on turn 18, January 45, and it's going to end with an Allied victory. Looking at the victory points, it looks like the Allies finished with 15, the Axis 12, and the Comintern 0. So pretty close game all the way around. I haven't updated the Pacific to Madman Dan's last turn. Knowing that the game ended, I didn't bother to go ahead and do that. So the disposition of forces here in the Pacific is not accurate to the final turn in the game here. But as far as the Axis overall, the good and the bad, some things we should have done differently, or things we could have done better, and maybe a look at a little bit what might have happened if the game would have continued. So starting over here in the European side of things with Germany and Italy. Italy, I guess, is the easiest to talk about. I really hated not bringing Italy into the game. I know I've said this before in other videos that, if I'm playing as Italy, 99 out of 100 times I'm going to bring them into the war just because it's boring not having them in there, just sitting there doing nothing. And I would rather bring them in and potentially lose than have them sit on the sidelines just to gain some, easy victory points. But the problem in this game, throughout the game really, was that, Italy didn't take Abyssinia initially. And I'm not even sure I could have. Both the French and the Soviet Union had lend-leased infantry down there before Italy even got their first turn. So it was really going to be difficult for Italy to even take Abyssinia. Now, I could have got a transport and brought another fighter down there or whatever. But you're talking several turns. Italy doesn't start with a naval transport. So there's a turn to buy it. Then there's a turn at least before it gets there. So you're talking at least a couple turns down the road by then. Both the French and the Russians could have continued to put 2 infantry in Abyssinia per turn. So I really think that if you have a concerted effort from the Russians and the French, an agreement between the two of them to defend Abyssinia, it's kind of difficult for Italy to take Abyssinia. And then the other territory Italy can take without coming into the conflict is Albania. But I had Germany take Albania for a couple of reasons. First of all, I wanted to use Albania as a springboard to get into Greece. Now, you can take Macedonia from Yugoslavia, but Thessaly is only bordered by Albania. So I wanted to go into both of those Greek territories on the same turn that I invaded Greece, so I didn't give any those free units in Thessaly to the British. So that was one reason. And the other reason is because I fully planned on bringing Italy into the conflict. So I figured I can just pick up 2 new territories anywhere in the Med. I mean, Crete was completely defenseless the whole game. Malta, was fairly easy to take as Italy. Maybe even like Western Egypt and so forth. So those are the reasons why I didn't take Albania as the Italians. But it just, as the game went on, the Free French became a major thorn in my side in the Mediterranean, and between them and the British, it just didn't make sense to bring Italy in. I had built up a strong navy as Italy, but it was kind of at the expense of any serious defense on the Italian mainland itself, as well as at the cost of the Italian Air Force. I only had a fighter and a tactical bomber by the end of the game. So I knew if I brought Italy in that even if they did have a slight advantage in the Med, in terms of a naval engagement, they wouldn't have had much left, and they have absolutely really nothing to defend Italy itself. So I knew that if Rome didn't fall itself, at the very least, there were plenty of Italian territories that the Allies could have taken that have an IPP value, and that would have just taken away from the victory points I would have gained bringing Italy in. So it just didn't make a lot of sense. In the end, I got 2 victory points off of Italy, three. One for the nationalist victory in Spain, one for Rome, and then one for having twice the capital ships in the Med. I finished with 5 battleships and a fleet carrier, so 6 total capital ships. To the Allies, 3. They had 3 battleships. So got 3 points out of a maximum, realistically, of 5 from Italy. If I had to do it over again, probably would have made an effort to take Abyssinia, and surely would have left Albania for the Italians. Could have gotten at least 1, maybe 2 more points, and as it turned out, the Axis lost just 15-12, so that could have made a big difference. But I'm still of the mindset that I can't say 99% of the time. Now, let's say 90% of the time, you should bring Italy into the conflict. I'm not sure. I mean, if Italy hadn't let, the Free French build up so many forces from Abyssinia, then it might have been more realistic to bring them in. Also, in my first YouTube war, I was Germany and Italy, and I did bring Italy in, and Italy actually had a pretty good game, but I was also able to bring a bunch of German units down into Italy to help defend the Italian mainland. And in this game, Germany was getting pressure from all sides, and it would have been difficult to dispatch enough German forces down to Italy to help with their defense. So Italy ended up staying out of it, unfortunately. It would have been a lot more fun, but just didn't see the point. And as each turn went by, that became less and less like a viable option. As far as Germany goes, fairly proud of what I did with Germany. They finished the game with, counting bonuses and whatnot, they were up to over $70, I believe, in income. If you look at the map, from Normandy on the Atlantic coast all the way to the gates of Moscow, all the way down through southern Europe, it's all German, with the exception of Denmark there, which we'll talk about that in a minute. So I really like what I did with Germany. I think even now, with the game having ended, they're still in a strong position. Got a lot of ground and air units on the board. Even in Russia, as you guys might have been able to tell from the last turn of the game or so, the Germans and the Russians had concluded a truce, and I had backed off from several territories in Russia. So I wasn't going to be able to take Moscow, but if that truce hadn't been concluded with the Russians, I would have probably had more territories. I gave up a handful of territories voluntarily to the Russians. Plus, on the turn that we concluded the truce, I had planned on going after a handful of other territories that had an IPP value, but then obviously didn't do that because we concluded the truce. So I think Germany would have been even stronger in Russia if the truce hadn't been concluded. I don't think I would have been able to take Moscow, nor would I probably even have tried. If you guys remember back a few turns ago, I was in Arel Kursk with a huge force, and I could have went into Moscow that turn. I believe it was about 3, maybe 4 turns ago. And I think Moscow would have fallen on that turn. The problem is that Knights Templar had a huge force here in western Russia and a pretty big infantry force here in Saratov. So if I would have went into Moscow that turn and taken it, it would have, taken a lot of my units for me to capture Moscow, and then he easily would have taken it back on that turn, coming in to Moscow from these 2 adjacent territories. There's no way I would have been able to survive that counterattack. So That's why I didn't go into Moscow when I really had the one chance to do it. Instead, that turn, if you remember, I came up and wiped out this force in Western Russia. And there was a big force there with a bunch of valuable offensive units, advanced artillery, some heavy armor, some motorized, a bunch of regular artillery. So I took out that force, and that really kind of pinned Knights Templar in Moscow without really too many options. He pretty much only had infantry units left, so he really had no offensive punch left. And it also, by taking out the force in Western Russia, it left everything to the west of Western Russia open to Germany. So at that time, Leningrad was still under Russian occupation. So was a couple territories up here in Finland. So by taking out that huge force in Western Russia, it opened up the ability for me to take the rest of Finland back and Leningrad. So even without taking Moscow, I got some good benefit from not going into Moscow itself. But then after I kind of gave up that one chance, Knights Templar continued to pump all kinds of units. I mean, just take a look at what's over there in Moscow now. And he's even moved stuff out. I mean, that's like, I don't know, upwards of 40 infantry, I think. He had tons of artillery and other ground units. It just, with a fortification. The problem was I wasn't going to be able to surround Moscow to negate the effects of the city. So it just didn't make any sense. Even if the truce hadn't been concluded, I don't think I would have tried for Moscow. I was just going to keep that huge force that's currently in Smolensk, which is over here, this force here. I was just going to keep that in Smolensk pretty much for the rest of the game, so that if he did venture out from Moscow, I would have picked him off and kind of just kept him pinned in Moscow itself. Was basically my plan on the Eastern Front. As far as in Western Europe, there's definitely a big-time buildup going on in Spain, and the Free French did take southern France this last turn. Not overly concerned, though. The one thing is, if you guys have been following along, you knew that that Global War 36 Enthusiast was doing all these little pinprick attacks on me, dropping paratroopers like in vacant territories in France, especially. He did this one move here in Denmark, which was semi-costly. It didn't end up affecting the outcome of the game, but anyways, the pinprick attacks, they were kind of annoying, but they weren't terrible. I mean, so he takes a territory for a turn, he gains that IPP value, but I take it right back and I kill off the unit that he landed in that territory with. So let's say an airborne, it costs $4 for an airborne. If he takes a $2 territory, well, I kill the airborne the next turn. He actually is -2 for the whole deal. 2 for the territory, but cost him $4 for the paratrooper. And it didn't distract me a whole heck of a lot because I kept a pretty strong force in Paris the whole game. And that was one of the reasons why I did do that. Not only to defend Paris itself, but also to be able to strike out at any of those territories in France that he might temporarily take back. Now, obviously, if he got a hit on my units when I went to recapture the territory, then the balance in terms of the economics of the move are a little bit more in his favor. But airborne only defended a 2, so the chances are he wasn't going to get a hit. So annoying, but not too distracting as far as those attacks. As far as what they have building up in Spain itself, the one thing that would scare me with that force, not so much the force coming into France from Spain itself, because I've got a huge force in Paris. I was pumping out 8 advanced mechs a turn in Bavaria, which is only 1 turn away from Paris because they can move 2. So I seriously doubt they were going to be able to take Paris. I don't think they would have been able to surround it. And mostly they have infantry, a handful of fighters, but I also have a large air force in Paris. That's this force over here. I was going to add 8 more advanced mechs coming over from Bavaria this turn. That would have given me 16 in Paris, along with the 11 infantry, the 9 fighters, the 4 AA. So I wasn't really worried about Paris falling. And again, kind of like on the Eastern Front with Knights Templar, if he would have ventured out from Moscow before our truce, and I would have kind of picked him off, I would have done the same thing with the Allies if they would have went into, let's say, Aquitaine in force or southern France. I would have ventured out with a handful of my forces in Paris and taken them out before they could have, secured that foothold there. So I wasn't so much worried about them coming into France by Spain. The one thing that would have worried me is that Global War 36 enthusiast had a bunch of transports here in this sea zone. And what he could have done, he had a ton of Marines, is he could have brought the transports through the English Channel and dropped 3 or 4, maybe 6 ground units in several different territories. And then I would have had to, counterattack. That would have been more of a issue for me than them coming up through Spain itself. As far as the Free French down here in southern France, they were going to get wiped out this turn. There's a couple of paratroopers, a couple mountain infantry, and a regular infantry. I was just going to bring a couple of ground units as cannon fodder and then all my planes from Paris and completely wipe that out, taking it back. The fighters they have in Spain aren't in a territory with an airfield adjacent to southern France, so they couldn't have scrambled. Plus, actually, I would have, not that they could have scrambled, but it would have actually been better for me if they could have, because I was going to bring overwhelming force, my jets, and about 15 fighters altogether. So if they could and would have scrambled, I would have taken all their fighters as well. So wasn't overly concerned about what's going on in Spain. Again, mostly just him using his transports to land different places. As far as Southern Europe goes, they definitely were on to me by dropping, if you watched Global War 36 enthusiast last video, he dropped a militia down in Aden, and that is because that is one of the British victory points by holding on to Aden and a couple other territories. And that's what I was trying to do by getting here in Kars. Kars isn't worth anything, but what I was hoping to do is take Kars, which I did, and then on this turn coming up, I was going to bring a bunch of my planes from Romania over, land in Kars, and then be able to use Kars as a springboard down to Aden. Because from Romania, I can't reach Aden with my paratroopers, but from Kars, I would have been able to go 1, 2, 3. They could have easily reached and got back. So I was taking Kars as a landing spot to eventually get to Aden if I could have. So, but Global War 36 enthusiast and Madman Dan are both smart guys. They're both very good players. So they saw that coming. Not that a single militia would have deterred me, but that was what my plan was down there. As far as going into Turkey or in Istanbul, I was thinking about it this turn coming up. I'm not sure. I've got those 13 cavalry in Bulgaria, 3 tank destroyers, 2 infantry. I got a bunch of planes in Romania. There's a lot in Istanbul, and it is a city, and a fortification, so it would have been tough, probably about a 50-50. The good thing would have been that if I would have went in there, even if I would have lost almost everything, as long as I took out all that, Global War 36 enthusiast would have had almost no units left in the med that he can move on those transports, so which would have, maybe allowed Italy to come into the game. So that was a possibility that if I would have went into Istanbul and taken it this turn, that Italy would have then come in on their portion of the turn, possibly. I also was going to go into Greece this turn. I was going to take the 2 cavalry in Albania, go into Thessaly, and also go into Macedonia at the same time with a couple units from Bulgaria, some of my planes from Romania, take those 2 Greek territories. They're only worth $1 combined, but that would have gotten me another point from Lebensraum. So I was going to go into Greece this turn, possibly Istanbul. Was going to take back southern France. Also up here in northern Europe, I was positioning units to go into Norway. Not that they're part of any victory objective, but this Norwegian territory here is worth a $2 bonus to Germany, plus just the fact that I would have gotten a couple more bucks altogether for Norwegian territory, so I was going to go into there. Let's see, what else? As far as them taking Denmark away, what my plan was, I saw that coming. with all of the little pinprick attacks, I knew that they were going to try to take one of my victory points away from me. So what I had been doing the last couple turns, and which would have happened if the game would have continued, is if you guys remember from the last turn, I moved these 9 German infantry into Belgium. So Belgium, the Netherlands, and Denmark make up 1 victory point for Germany. So I had moved those 9 infantry in there. I had bought 8 infantry this last turn, and those 8 infantry were going to move into the Netherlands on turn 19 here. And then I would have bought 8 more infantry, and then on turn 20, those would have moved into Denmark. So in Denmark, Netherlands, and Belgium, there would have each been between 8 and 9 infantry in each territory. Plus, I was going to station a handful of fighters here in West Germany. And West Germany borders all 3 of those territories. So then that way, it would have been extremely difficult for Global War 36 enthusiasts to, even with all his naval transports, to land and try to take out between 8 and 9 infantry backed up by a half a dozen fighters or so that I would have scrambled from West Germany. But I just didn't have enough time to do that. So I would have clearly taken Denmark back this turn with those infantry there, but it would have taken a couple more turns before I could get enough infantry in those territories to guard that victory point. Another thing I had considered was buying a bunch of submarines. I have improved construction, so subs are $5 a piece. If we look over here in this C zone, I have 3 major shipyards, so I can produce 15 units right there. I was going to drop 15 subs down a couple of turns ago for $75, and at that time I had upwards of $100 a turn, so I could have easily afforded it. I was going to drop down 15 subs along with these couple of battleships and couple of coastal defense ships, and then move out the next turn and start trying to deal with the British Navy that was lurking around London. And with all those transports, I mean, that would have been great. I mean, it might have even caused Global War 36 enthusiasts to move some of his naval units in the Med back up this way to counteract that German naval force, which in turn would have allowed me to bring Italy into the war. Plus, like I said, he's got so many transports over here in 33 that I could have done some serious damage there. The problem was that right on the turn, before the turn before that for the British is when Global War 36 enthusiasts started making a push into like Normandy and Aquitaine. It wasn't a serious push, but I had to buy ground units on Germany's next turn to push those British units out of Europe. So I kind of missed the boat there with buying all those U-boats to go against the British Navy. And then after that, it just seemed like every turn between them invading Spain and landing units here and there, it seemed like I had to spend all my money on ground and air units to secure Western Europe. So I never had the chance to drop those 15 subs. I would have been really curious to see the reaction from Global War 36 enthusiast on his British turn right after I had dropped 15 subs there in C Zone 15, but it never came to pass. But overall, happy with Germany, their performance. As far as I know, there was some talk of, well, what about dropping militia here and trying to cover all your territories. I'm just not a big fan of that, especially if you have a country that is in control of so many territories like I was as Germany. You're just not going to hold everything. It's just not possible, to drop militia and all these occupied territories. You're just taking away money from other valuable units. So, I mean, if you basically try to hold everything, you hold nothing as far as I'm concerned. So my kind of defense in regards to that is build up like 1 or 2 strong territories in that particular region, keep it well stocked, and then they are able to strike out and push out any invasion before it gets a foothold. And Paris over here in France is perfect for that because it's centered. All of the adjacent French territories, or all the territories in France, are adjacent to Paris. So you could just leave a strong force in Paris and even leave everything else completely defenseless. And yes, They can land, drop a paratrooper, they can land a couple infantry on a transport, but you're able to push them out right away. And what do they really gain from that? As opposed to, dropping a militia each turn in each of those vacant French territories and taking your money away from, other valuable units. And I followed that strategy here in Russia too, keeping one strong force. I did start dropping a couple of militia down in the southern Russian territories because I was worried that the British would pull what they did here in Denmark and land a guy and take away a victory point from me. But other than securing those victory points, I left Russia pretty much empty, other than having like one strong centrally placed force. And same thing down in southern Europe, based from Romania, that can strike down into the rest of the Balkans. So not too bad for Germany. If I could do things over again, for Germany, not a whole heck of a lot. I think I did pretty much as much as I could until the truce with Russia, the Comintern, and the Allies had, worked out an agreement between the two of them. So Germany was kind of, facing a bunch of different enemies. I didn't really have much of a chance to go after England, especially London. I was toying around with it at the beginning of the game. I had like 5 paratroopers and 5 air transports, but then the British went ahead and put a bunch of planes on patrol all across England and the sea zones there. So I would have had to fight through that screen. So once he put all those planes up in the air, I just kind of said, forget it, and focused my attention more towards, going after Russia once we were at war. So, Germany maxed out their victory points other than one from Lebensraum. So would have taken that back if we would have played one more turn, but we lost. The Axis lost by 3, so one more point wouldn't have swung it either way. As far as the Pacific, I'll leave most of the Japanese assessment to Boston Bruce. I think he played a great game. Obviously, at the end here, Japan is pretty much backed up. But honestly, I think pretty much every YouTube war I've watched or participated in, this is the fate of Japan. I think that Japan is the hardest country to play in the game. They have so many enemies. They have a decent income, but for all the units they need to buy, it's just not nearly enough. They can go China heavy at the beginning of the game, but then you're allowing Anzac and the Far East Command to build things up. And then once the U.S. is in the war, if the U.S. focuses mostly on Japan, the U.S. alone is enough to take on Japan. Then you throw in Anzac and the Far East Command, and if China, whether it's the CCP, the KMT, or both that are still around, Japan's, getting assaulted from every direction. And, the money islands are great. They bring in a bunch of extra money, but, how difficult is it to defend the money islands, it's not like it's land territory adjacent to Tokyo where you can just move units down every turn. They're, several sea zones away. You got to have the transports. You can drop militia on there, but militia are basically garbage. So even on defense. So it's just hard to hold on to what you get. I'm actually kind of excited to play Japan in the future because I want to see if, not that I'm anything spectacular at the game, but just I think Japan presents the greatest challenge in the entire game. I really do. And again, going back to what I have observed in YouTube wars, I've seen a bunch of people play as Japan. I had the Japanese in my first YouTube war, and I was in the exact same position Boston Bruce is right now. I held on to Tokyo, but pretty not much else. Operation Skyhook, if you guys had watched that, which I encourage you guys to go over and watch that if you haven't, that was a great YouTube war. Japan was absolutely rolling. They even took Calcutta. They were kicking some serious ass. And by the end of the game, the U.S. again had Japan backed in the corner. Operation Winter Solstice, I believe, also the same thing. Japan was rolling, and by the end, they were stuck in the Japanese home islands with Tokyo pretty much. So definitely not going to knock Boston Bruce at all. He played a really good game. It's just Japan is extremely difficult to play. So my hat's off to Boston Bruce. I would team up with him again anytime. And I think if things would have went a little bit different for us here and there, we could have pulled out the victory. I mean, as it is, we lost 15-12. So I guess not anything to be ashamed of there. Also have to tip my hat to my opponents. First Knights Templar, he definitely threw me for a loop with his declaration of war. So I did not see that coming at all. So those sneaky Russians definitely got the drop on the Germans there. And Knights Templar was really rolling for quite a while. He had the Baltic states. He was down into Iran. He even had some of the Japanese territories in the Far East. So Finland. He was rolling quite a bit. It's just that once he declared war on me, I focused all my attention on him just because the U.S. still wasn't in the war at that time. The British weren't strong enough to really give me any issues in Western Europe, so I could focus all my attention on Russia. And that made it difficult for Knights Templar. I mean, Germany was collecting more money, and I had already so many ground units on the board that I think it was kind of inevitable. But I think Knights Templar put up a good game, and his diplomatic skills, switching from the Allies to the Axis and turning on the Allies, and definitely my hat's off to him. As far as Global War 36 enthusiast, he is a compadre from my first YouTube war, and he is a serious challenge for sure. I mean, if you look at the board, I mean, how can you complain about his performance? Whether it's the UK, the Free French, the Far East Command, or Anzac, I mean, every single one of the countries he controls are absolutely a monster right now. So I'm sure he'll humbly say that it was all Madman Dan pulling the strings, but I also know what a good player he is. So he always presents a challenge when you play with him. Like I said, I mean, just look at the board. I mean, Anzac and the Far East Command. I mean, take the U.S. out of the equation. Just put Japan against the Far East Command and Anzac, and Japan's got their hands full. That's how well Global War 36 enthusiasts is doing in the Pacific. And then Free French. I mean, that really it kept Italy basically out of the war. He just flipped all those Vichy ships that last turn. I mean, he just had some really major moves as the Free French, and the British too. I mean, they're in Istanbul. They got that huge force in Spain. I was never able to challenge his naval units at all. He's got two huge fleets. So, and then finally, Madman Dan. This was my first time playing with him. And if you want a serious butt kicking and an education at the same time, I encourage you to go ahead and hook up with him for a YouTube war. His reputation is definitely well earned in the community. An excellent player. He's playing the U.S. and the KMT, and what could you really think you could do as the KMT? Not a whole lot, right? And then the U.S. he was rolling horribly to get the U.S. into the war until way later than usual, and yet look at where the U.S. is. So that's just obviously you got to tip your hat to the guy. Again, you're definitely going to get an education. Maybe at the expense of winning the game, but you're definitely getting a very good education. He knows the game backwards and forwards, is a great strategist, is always like 3 steps ahead of you, just presents a really great challenge. So definitely enjoyed playing with him. And that's pretty much it for Operation No Time to Die. So now that was my second YouTube war, and I finished second both times, so I hope this isn't a trend that's going to continue. I don't want to always be the bridesmaid. I want to be the bride one of these times. So hopefully the next game I can be part of the winning team. I want to thank you guys for watching, and definitely keep the comments coming. I know I make my share of mistakes, and when you guys point them out, it's definitely not taken as a negative. It's to make me a better player. And I hope you guys enjoy the content and keep watching. As far as future news, I'm happy to announce that the next YouTube war, and it's going to be the same 5 of us. It's going to be Boston Bruce, Knights Templar, Madman Dan, myself, and Global War 36 Enthusiast. We are going to get into another YouTube war, and that is going to be Operation GoldenEye. So we're keeping the James Bond theme going. So after this video, I'm going to go ahead and tear this down and set it back up. Hopefully, maybe by the weekend, we can start kicking that off. We are switching things up as far as who's playing what. So this will be my 3rd YouTube war, and this will be the first one where I'm not playing as the Axis. I am taking on the role of the UK Commonwealth and French. So I will control the United Kingdom, ANZAC, the Far East Command, and the French. My partner, my ally partner, taking over control of the U.S. and KMT is going to be Knights Templar. Madman Dan is going to be the Comintern, and Boston Bruce and Global War 36 Enthusiast are going to be the Axis. And I believe that Boston Bruce is going to be the Germans and Italians, and Global War 36 Enthusiast is going to be the Japanese. So that should be the lineup. Again, hopefully you guys will be seeing the first video in that by this weekend. And take care. And again, thanks for watching, and hopefully we can put on another good show for you guys.